If you're looking at this video, you should have already watched the Principles for Choosing Evidence How-To, which explains how this strategy works. Remember, it's a strategy for choosing the most appropriate type of evidence to support your argument. You could also, of course, use it to examine the evidence that somebody else uses to support their argument. So remember, we had a matrix with 3 principles for choosing evidence: trustworthiness, emotional appeal, and rational appeal. And we used those to help us try to decide what types of evidence we might use to support our argument. So if we feel our audience needs the trustworthiness, we could use expert quotes, eyewitness quotes, or a case study with plenty of detail. If we feel they need emotional appeal, we could use a case study involving a very personal story, some eyewitness quotes with emotional responses. Or if we feel they need rational appeal, we could use facts, statistics, research studies, or analogical or causal reasoning. So remember, we had 3 questions that we were going to use to think this through. The first was, what type of evidence best supports my claim? The second was, which of the principles of the 3 we just looked at is important for this claim with this audience? And the third is, therefore, what type of evidence should I use? Let's look at a model. In this model, our purpose is to convince governments to reduce subsidies for animal agriculture. Within that argument, we'll make a number of claims. One of the claims might be animal agriculture has a more damaging impact on water resources than plant agriculture. This was a claim that was actually used in one of my grade 10 students' essays. And the audience might be a committee of the European Commission. So let's look at the claim first, that animal agriculture is more damaging to water resources than plant agriculture. What is it about the claim? What type of evidence might best support that claim? There's a couple of considerations, not all, but a couple you might want to think about. So animal agriculture has quite a number of different impacts on water resources. The most obvious, of course, is that total water usage, but there are other impacts, so we might need to think sure that we cover all of the major ones. Secondly, this is a comparison, and when we're comparing something like this, statistics can work very, very well to show relationships between things. So some comparative statistics might be really helpful. Move on to the second question about audience. Which of the principles is important for this claim with this audience? European commissioners are a professional audience, so they'll need some professional evidence. In order to be trustworthy or credible to them in that context, it will need to come from scientific sources. The audience is European, so it should be to be credible and trustworthy to them, it will need to be evidence from the European context, because the American context or other contexts would be very different. And we should remember that our commissioners may come from a country where animal agriculture is a primary industry, or where they may have been lobbied by groups from animal agriculture, and so they may have biases, and they may be aware of evidence that could seem to go against our argument, so we may need to include that as counter-arguments and debunk that evidence. So therefore, what should we use in terms of evidence? It needs to be trustworthy. So, as we said, research findings and statistics from credible scientific sources in the European context. And in this case, it needs to be rational. So research findings, statistics, comparative statistics, but also maybe to include evidence that needs to be debunked that could be used as a counter-argument. There is no right answer with choosing evidence. You just have to kind of try and think through what it is you want to prove, who you want to prove it to, and come up with the best fit you can.